All right, welcome to a special episode of UMDA Podcast. Today we are going to go over a list of people, call them dissidents, call them members of the intellectual dark web, as Dave Rubin calls it, call it the new media, basically people that have been extremely influenced or propagated by the emergence of the internet and
culture warriors.
Culture warriors, people that have influenced us, and I think generally what I'm getting from this list that we've compiled here is that it's people not afraid to ask questions and to keep asking questions and to not stay on an answer. Would you say that's true, Tommy?
Yeah, they're not afraid to have uncomfortable conversations in the effort to find truth and what makes sense, and they don't care about hurting people's feelings as long as it's factual.
Right.
Right. So that's I mean, these guys are also there's a lot of people out there right now. I think we compiled a list of kind of your starter kit, your 101. I mean, there's obviously tons of people every day, and I wish we can get them all, but this is I think a big list that will get you started in this need to know.
Yeah. So I think we want to design this for people who maybe saw some Jordan Peterson clip, or they saw some some Ben Shapiro on CNN one time, and they thought, oh, I want to learn more about that. So this is for people who want to go down the rabbit hole, who are kind of sick and tired of listening to mainstream opinion all the time, what's politically correct, what's accepted in normal everyday culture, and for maybe even for college kids who are learning stuff in their class that they're not quite so sure about and want to hear another side of the story.
So we categorized it into we'll start off and kind of go a little more in depth for the first few, and so it's some of the most popular, and we'll kind of work our way down for anybody listening who's on the bottom of that list.
Yeah. Tell us about lightning round. We got lightning round, and then our final round is a little bit sad and a little bit troubling, but that's okay. We'll get there.
That's okay. So like I said, we're starting off with some of the most important. So I'll just kick it off.
Kick it off.
Number one on that list is me and Michael. Just kidding. All right. So first guy we have on the list is Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is a Orthodox Jew. He's a conservative. He actually is an extremely intelligent guy with an incredible background. He went to college at age 16. He was a syndicated columnist at UCLA by age 17. Graduated Harvard Law School, which I'm told is impressive. He's written 7 books, which I've only read 5 of. Sorry, Ben. My favorite, and I think the most popular, is called Bullies, how the left culture uses fear to silence people they disagree with, or something like that. Fantastic book, though, and that was written in like 2013, so I would argue he was ahead of his time. He currently is the host of the Ben Shapiro Show on YouTube and host of the largest conservative podcast in the nation. He has been a conservative for most of his life, but he hates Trump. He always has, and he still does. He does a really good job at telling his audience, that you don't have to just blindly follow whoever is ahead of your party, which I think is an extremely important message. Yeah. But I think, and a lot of these guys, it starts with their controversy. And so it's important to talk about that. I think Ben Shapiro really got a big following after he was on the Piers Morgan show, talking talking about gun control with Pierce, and if you haven't seen it, you need to watch that. You'll learn everything you need to know about Ben Shapiro, and especially when we talk about not having those uncomfortable conversations. I mean, he starts off the show saying, Ben, thanks for having you on. And he says, hey, Pierce, so you need to stop standing on the graves of the dead kids at Sandy Hook to make your point.
And then Pierce says, how dare you?
How dare you?
How
dare you? You can keep saying that, Pierce, but that's not a point. You're not making an argument. You're just saying that. So it's phenomenal. I would definitely check that out. What's your thoughts on Ben?
Yeah, Ben's great. I think he's um, whether you lean more liberal or more conservative, he's one of those guys that's just kind of all around trustworthy. When he's giving his all and giving his best when he's analyzing, and he's one of these guys that's he's definitely philosophical. He has philosophical conversations, but his passion is kind of like the mud trenches of politics. So he knows a lot about the ins and outs of the way the government works and stuff like that. So he's fun to listen to on that end as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would never want to argue with him because he would just rattle stats off, and then I wouldn't. I'd be like, oh, okay. I guess that sounds right.
Whatever you say, Ben. All right, next up we have Sam Harris. Sam Harris. So, I first learned about Sam Harris when my brother gave me one of his books a couple of years ago, called Free Will. He is. Let's rewind. So Sam was a student of philosophy at Stanford University. He dropped out. Well, in Stanford they call it stopping out. I guess you can never drop out there. You're always free to come back. Stanford does so many smart things. They're great. Anyways, so Sam spent like most of his 20s basically trying to understand consciousness. He was a practicer of meditation and all that stuff. And experimented with psychedelic drugs, did all this journey to kind of understand what is being, what consciousness means, and eventually went back to UCLA, finished at Stanford, went to UCLA to study neuroscience, and then part of the way through his PhD decided he wanted to write. He was heavily influenced by 9/11 when the attacks happened. And he heard a bunch of people with different opinions about why people flew into to the Twin Towers. He had a strong opinion that it had something to do with the power of belief and the power of religion, that the Muslim attackers were doing it in the glory of God and in the hopes that they would get to paradise. So in that sense, he became sort of, he claims by his own admit accidentally, in public intellectual known for his atheism because his first book was Letter to a Christian Nation. I don't know if I'm wrong on that, but so he didn't drop out of UCLA, but he moved away from the lab research and things like that of studying the brain and neuroscience, and became a writer. Became part of the Four Horsemen of Atheism, which was him, Chris Hitchens, Dan Dennett, and Richard Dawkins. Then eventually evolved. His writing evolved to encapsulate spirituality without religion. He talks about free will. He talks about, one of my favorite books is Lying, like the bad effects of lying, and now hosts his own podcast, which is extremely popular. I would say that, because of some of his beliefs, including free will, including the idea that everything is deterministic, he leans a little more left because he attributes inequalities in the world as not by the fault of people who experience it. So he's a little more liberal on that end. He's had some great debates with some other people on this list. What do you think about him, Tommy?
So, I mean, Sam Harris, it's hard to say anything bad about Sam Harris. He's extremely intelligent. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, that's one thing. He's like Joe Rogan called him a verbal black belt.
A verbal black belt, yeah. I mean, we talked about, we'll talk a lot about people's arguing techniques, but his is just like, oh, well, he's right. Because he's so logical, and he has
ultra logical,
like too much logic, if that's a thing.
Yeah.
I also think that, because I like to point out the controversies and how some of these guys, he also got really popular when he was on Bill Maher with Ben Affleck.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And you said he leans more left, and he wasn't afraid to say that, like, hey, liberals, you're reading this wrong, right? Like, don't call people Islamophobes, right? Islamophobes for saying things like and that they're anti-feminist, like they're because they're extremely anti-women, they're extremely anti-gay, right? Why aren't we talking about that?
Right. His point was that out of the billion Muslims in the world, like maybe 1 million were extremists. Like that was the stat. And now Ben Affleck was on Bill Maher, and he was like, pointing out the fact that it's an extremely small percentage. And then Sam was saying, well, that's true, but there's also like hundreds of millions, like 100, 200 million that because of these actual surveys that people responded to, that maybe they're not extremists like through violence, but they want like Islam to be the one religion in the world and like live by Sharia law, which now Sam was making this points, and then Ben Affleck was like, yeah, it's like that's grossly racist. This is just about your hatred for brown people. He didn't exactly say that, but that was the idea behind it, and that triggered. I've heard like tons of people on the internet who have conversations like this talk about how that was like a moment of like red pill for them, where they're like, wait a minute, I know that calling this grossly racist isn't the right move here, and that, yeah, you're right, that kicked off a lot of notoriety for him.
Yeah, and I would just say that Sam Harris is what philosophy is and neuroscience are his go-tos. But just remember when listening to him that he is just a philosopher. So he speaks with such incredible intelligence and certainty, but that doesn't mean that he's right about everything. And so just as he would challenges you to think for yourself, like make sure you do that when listening to Sam Harris.
Yeah, and that cannot be found more, the idea behind that could not be more exemplified than in his debate that he had with our next person, which
yes.
is.
Which most people probably already know, Jordan Peterson. That was actually the first time I heard Sam Harris, believe it or not, was when he debated Truth with Jordan Peterson, which people like, everybody said they hated that podcast, but then they still talk about it today.
Yeah.
But so Jordan Peterson is a Canadian born, still in Canada, clinical psychologist. He also is a professor at the University of Toronto, teaching psychology. He's now more of a cultural critic, and kind of a self-help guy. But he really got popular and started blowing up all over the internet a few years ago when the Canadian law tried to pass Bill C-16, which was a law that said you had to abide by certain gender pronouns for the transgender community, and Z, Zay, Zer, right? Which Jordan Peterson like adamantly stood against. I think most people listening to this probably would, not because of anything to do with transgenderism, just because you're making me say a word.
Right.
Right.
Like as a compulsive law. A lot of people took it as transphobia, and they still do today, which is remarkable after all the hours that he spent speaking on this topic. But go ahead.
Yeah, and it's a lot different than you can't say this word because it's offensive. That we could have a real debate about, right? Like, look, you're offending a lot of people by saying this. Let's not say that word anymore. But by making me say something is a whole it's a slippery slope that we don't want to go down. And Jordan Peterson, we saw how intellectual he was, right, and how savvy he was when he came out and just crushed everybody that he debated this with, from mainstream media to Joe Rogan to Sam Harris, and he's written 2 books. The first one was actually late 90s called Maps of Meaning, and then one just came out called the 12 Rules to Life, Antidote to Chaos. And really what you find in Jordan Peterson is, you come for that controversy and that like entertainment of how savvy he is, but then you stay for like, he can actually help my life, right? And that's his goal. He's a psychologist. So he says, clean your room. You can't change the world when you can't even keep your room clean. What's your take on JP?
Yeah. See him as sort of like a 21st century preacher. He did this long, it's amazing. Like, I listened to hours and hours and hours. He did this series on biblical stories, where he takes the Bible and he approaches it from a psychological perspective. Like, so not like literally, don't take these things literally, like as they actually happened in history. And I think this is the reason why he's appealing to a lot of young men these days, because with the age of the internet, there's an increase in atheism, and usually hand in hand with that goes nihilism, where you just believe that everything means nothing, and there's no point to doing anything, that life is meaningless, hopeless, and all that stuff. So in a way, he's kind of started this intellectual revolution online where he takes these old stories from he's in his classes he analyzed Pinocchio, he's analyzed Lion King, Little Mermaid, and then of course other stories like the Bible and things like that, and he approaches it from like an archetype perspective, like looking at what patterns of behavior throughout time have been proven to increase the likelihood that you'll experience a better life, a life where you find more meaning, a life where you aren't stuck in just hedonism or whatever it may be. So he's and his stance on his belief in God has always been kind of what's the word? He's never denied. He hasn't denied or confirmed that he truly believes in a God, but his basically stance is that like life is so chaotic and so it's impossible for us to know everything or to know really anything much at all, that there's little small things you can do to improve your life, like cleaning your room, fixing up the things around you before you go out into the world and try to fix the world, which I think is there's been a great response to that online, especially from young men. All right, who we got next? Oh, Stephan Molyneux. All right, so Stephan, I actually just recently discovered him in the past 6 months. He hosts the largest philosophy podcast in the world. I think on YouTube he has over 700,000 subscribers. So Stephan is fully funded by his audience, so he doesn't have any sort of sponsors that back him. And probably because of this, he is not afraid to touch any topic that you can imagine. He kind of has his YouTube channel goes over kind of 3 or 4 different types of shows that he does. One type is he does a call-in show where he has people from all over the world, anyone call in, anyone who speaks English, call in, and basically it's kind of like a therapy session. So he really dives deep quickly with people and their problems and their life problems, and it's incredible to see his depth of knowledge of emotions and psychology, and I think he helps people solve their problems pretty quick, or at least helps people see their problems in a better light. He also does the Truth About video series, so he'll say the truth about George Washington, the truth about whatever it may be from history, that there's a general narrative about what everyone thinks about it, and he'll kind of try to give the contrarian view in that way. Recently, I think with the expansion of his channel, he's been kind of more like a Ben Shapiro, where he kind of talks about what's going on that day versus like more long-term philosophical podcasts that will last a long time. So he's kind of getting more in the regular news cycle, sort of with this new media trend. But it's he's a really fun to listen to, and has a lot of things to offer. So I think the controversy with him is he talks about race and IQ a lot, not because he's hung up on it, but because of his perceived stance that anyone in media, anyone in academia, refuses to acknowledge this bell curve of intelligence for individual people, and for disparities between groups, like he'll say, whatever, Ashkenazi Jews and East Asians have the highest IQ per group, like if you just separate it out by all that stuff, and then he'll go down the spectrum from white and then Hispanic and black, and so that's what he'll talk about. It's so whenever new media, or not new media, whenever someone from mainstream media or journalists generally will bash him, it's because of something he says regarding that. And the reason he brings it up is because of affirmative action and all this stuff. So that's a big controversy about him. A lot of people talk about him, or a lot of people know about him through mainstream media because of that. But he has a lot of good points to give, and is not afraid to talk about anything. Did you have anything to say, Tom?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, he's whether you like him or not, because some would call him kind of manipulative or aggressively leading with his questioning tactics. But whether you like him or not, you have to admire his talent. he is extremely talented when it comes to making people see your problems, as you pointed out, and making his points. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's so entertaining to be a part of, and then of course his view on economics is just, he did perfect. I mean, it's absolutely perfect, and he, like, you can't argue with him when it comes to that.
I mean, the dude is so brave. Like, and I think it partially because of he's fully fan funded, which there's no conflict of interest. I mean, none perceived. The dude is someone to be respected and admired because he goes really deep into really hard issues. Cool. Who's next?
Next we have kind of a controversial figure, Milo Yiannopoulos. The fabulous Milo. So Milo was the former senior editor of Breitbart News. He was let go for a lot of controversy surrounding his childhood. I think that was misrepresented, though, of what he said on Joe Rogan's podcast. But he's a self-proclaimed journalist, writer, cultural libertarian, but he's more often described as a professional troll and provocateur, right? So a couple big points on him. He's a huge Trump supporter, calls Trump daddy.
Right.
But a couple big points on him is he was actually, and Mike and I talked about this on our original podcast, is he was kicked off of Twitter for making a trollish, comment about the Ghostbusters.
Yeah, he said Leslie Jones from SNL looks like a man, and then his followers then proceeded to bombard her with racist tweets and videos and responses, which he got all the blame for. So then he got kicked off of Twitter, and that kind of like ignited his notoriety and his college tours around the country.
Right, because then the next piece was in February 2017. He was in Berkeley and was going to do a big event, and that caused some of the biggest riots, I think still to this day, for any type of libertarian, conservative speaker going to a college campus. It was absolutely insane. They shut down the event. It's where the world learned about Antifa, and and the punch of Nazi memes went crazy. And just I like to just point out for him, once we say that those type of things, is that Milo isn't at all a racist or a Nazi or a homophobe, because he's he's a half Jewish gay man who's married to a black. But beyond that, I mean, I just like to think, I think it's kind of ironic. Yeah. But beyond that, if you listen to him, right, listen to some of his talks and his lectures and some of his literature, some of his writings, he actually is he makes a lot of good points, and he does it in an entertaining way. But his stance on Islam and feminism, I think, is something to listen to, open-minded.
Yeah, and he was going to publish a book called Dangerous, and Simon & Schuster, the publisher, decided to cut his deal, and so he self-published, and it ended up going #1 on Amazon for a little while. I think something that really clicked with me with him was he was talking about his upbringing. Like he said that his dad worked some sort of company where they coordinated employment for different bars and bouncers. I think it was something like that, where he was hiring a lot of blue collar guys, and so as a result, Milo was hanging around these guys a lot as a young kid, and so he understands sort of like what the Trump base was. He grew up in England, but he was still around these working class guys from England, and he said that he grew up kind of privileged lifestyle, went to college, and then got out and started working in media, started working as a journalist, and he realized that everyone around him was living in an alternate universe as compared to the average person, blue-collar worker person. And he was like, he that kind of what flipped him and made him sort of a contrarian. And so I think he's people love to hate him, because with the identity politics game that the left plays, where your sexual orientation or your race or your religion or your background is your virtue or is your identity. He's someone that would traditionally be a darling of the left, but he has all these right-wing conservative views, and so they can't stand the fact that he's relevant. And you mentioned the Joe Rogan thing. Yeah, like almost everyone on this list has been tried to be taken down by mainstream media once, twice, 100 times, where he said he was sexually molested as a young teen, and well, you can go look into the controversy. Yeah, and he said he liked. Yeah, he's so. Yeah, you can look into that for yourself, and what happened there with that controversy, and what came of that. But another,
and that's just I just have to jump in there. Like that's the point of everything we're saying. Like form your own opinion. You know?
Yeah. We're not experts.
Like you Google anything about Milo Yiannopoulos, you're gonna get like all the bad stuff, and you know. Just listen to it. Listen to the Joe Rogan podcast and form your own damn opinion. You know?
Yeah, that's perfect. I was going to point that out. Like the point of this video is a jumping off board for all this stuff. Listen to it. Don't listen to it. Go listen to these people. Call us crazy. But yeah, form your own opinion. That's the whole point.
Next up, we got Joe Rogan.
So Joe. I call him Joe. We're at that level. Joe Rogues. yo Rogues. So Joe, probably a lot of people know he's the largest, most successful podcast of all time. He's got at least 1.2 million, maybe 3 subscribers on YouTube. I'm not sure. Definitely a lot. Definitely over hundreds of millions of downloads. Maybe even 1 billion. I don't know. Downloads of his podcast over the years. He's done over 1,000 of them, where he goes into long conversations with interesting people. And Joe originally was a host on TV. He's a comedian. He still is a stand-up comedian.
Fear Factor.
He was on Fear Factor as a host. He does play-by-play commentary for the UFC. So he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He was a national champion Taekwondo when he was a teenager, and all this comes together. Oh, he's also a proponent of weed and psychedelic drugs. So all this comes together to make a crazy, cool character. And I think what a lot of people are attracted by with Joe is his curiosity. You know, he claims he doesn't claim to be the smartest guy in the world. He just is infinitely curious in all the guests he brings on his show, and asks them great questions, and isn't afraid to get into a debate with his guests too, which is kind of sometimes it's tricky with these podcasters. You want to be a gracious host, but you also want to debate someone. So he's definitely a respected character with this new media, and he was kind of one of the first adopters of podcasting as well. 7, 8, 9 years ago.
Absolutely. I would just say Joe Rogan's a perfect person for any of these people that you don't know. You can just type in the person and then Joe Rogan and watch these people on Joe Rogan, because he does a phenomenal job. I mean, which is why he's the biggest podcast ever. Right. Also, you check out his Netflix special, Triggered. He's also a stand-up comedian, and he kills it. So, all right. So next on the list, we got Gavin McInnes. Gavin McInnes is the founder of Vice magazine originally, which is kind of how he got his momentum. He's the host of the Gavin McInnes Show. He's a former commentator on Fox News. He really got a lot of his like I keep saying, things start with the controversy, where he had like an ultra feminist on his show, and he just destroys her. Like, it's almost sad.
Eviscerated.
It's sad. It's like, okay, stop, this poor girl. But he, Gavin's a cool guy, right? He's good for I think he's good for young men to listen to. He's funny, right? He's kind of similar to Milo, where he doesn't really care, to offend.
Speaking of which, they made out with each other.
That's right. Just
to trigger everyone.
Gavin, to me though, I got a fascination with him because I went to go see him in NYU, and the Antifa was there. That was the first time seeing them live, and they just went insane and tried to, they pepper sprayed them. And
which Antifa is like the group of protesters that wear the black masks and just try to cause chaos at a lot of protests, political protests.
Yeah, and I had no idea that he was so hated, because to me he's just this funny, guy, and they started calling him a racist and a Nazi and the usual. That's where I've talked about it before, which really got me into this world and started this with Mike. He's also the founder of the Proud Boys, which is a kind of a Western chauvinist group. They just strongly believe that Western culture is better, and you can look into that. And then currently the host of Get Off My Lawn podcast, which Michael is really into.
He's so funny. Yeah, I think he's just one of these guys. Like he jokes because he said he was a teenager and he just hated the government. He hated control. He was an anarchist as a young guy, and he said my views haven't changed. Like I started Vice Media with Shane Smith and Sarush Alvi. These guys from Canada, and then now Vice is a household name. It's a huge media company now, but he sold it off in like 2008, and wasn't liking the direction it was going in, and then like was a contributor to Fox News for a while. I think he's just one of these guys that is libertarian. He likes people to just do their own thing. Doesn't like control in life. Doesn't like bureaucracy, and that's translated to just being caught on the different sides of the political spectrum for his different throughout his career. But another one of these guys, I would put him up there with Stephan Molyneux, with just like not afraid to say anything, just like unafraid of what the backlash will be. You'll talk about anything. If you want to listen to something that is completely different from mainstream media, completely different from what you're hearing in university classes, he's the guy. All right, next up we got Dave Rubin. So Dave is another one of these guys. He worked for the Young Turks for a while, which is a left-leaning, to say the least, media outlet on YouTube, and kind of had a falling out with the way their company was going, what stories they were covering, their point of view, and started his own podcast, the Rubin Report. Another one of these guys who has a lot of the people that we're talking about, the people on this list, he'll probably have old episodes of him being interviewed on the show. So Dave calls himself a classical liberal. He really likes to talk about the idea that the left is no longer left, that liberalism means something different today than it did 150 years ago, and he's a big he's a student of Larry King. I think Larry King's one of his mentors, where he likes to mostly keep the interview about the questions to the person. He wants to let whoever his guest is, he doesn't want to like debate them too much. He doesn't want to lead them too much. He just kind of wants them to give their point of view and get it out there. And he likes to have people from all sides of the spectrum on the show. He definitely prioritizes more libertarian, conservative people in terms of who he has on his show, but he tries to give all sides of the spectrum a chance to give their voice out there and to get a good big picture of the political landscape, the philosophical landscape, and I think he does a good job of it.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, for me, I usually don't go. I don't watch any Dave Rubin to hear what Dave Rubin has to say. It's usually, he does a great job at giving people a platform.
Right. Cool.
Next up, we have Alex Jones.
Infowars.
If you don't know why we're laughing, you
turn the freaking frogs gay.
Alex Jones is the biggest conspiracy theorist of all time. 9/11 to moon landings to everything. I think he has Infowars, which is a show. I don't know too much about it. To be honest, I don't watch it that often. But if you want to know anything about Alex Jones, you don't. Just watch Joe Rogan's episode 911, on purpose 9/11, where he gets drunk and high and just goes off.
That episode is unreal. It's unreal. He's another one of these guys like Milo, where if you just Google his name, just go listen to him. Like, just don't read anything about him. Don't read any. I mean, you can, but don't read. I would not suggest reading any journalist stories about him, any mainstream media outlet stories. Just go listen to what he says.
Agreed. Next up, we have Mike Cernovich.
Wait, last thing about Alex Jones is that he has a problem on his YouTube channel with actually a lot of these people have this problem of getting demonetized, where his videos are not don't get paid from advertisers through YouTube, and has been in multiple quarrels with CNN and mainstream media over his growing influence on American audiences. Anyways, go ahead. Next one, Mike Cernovich.
And we're back. Next on our list is Mike Cernovich. Mike Cernovich, first of all, we have to thank for him putting together that Night of Freedom that Michael and I talked about before, which is where we met Anna, Khait, and other people. And so he's a right-leaning, he's libertarian, more to the right, loves Trump, big Trump guy. He kind of has that anarcho-capitalism, extreme libertarian when it comes to economics. If it was up to him, no government would be his policy.
Yeah, which is Stephan Molyneux as well. His same position.
That's right.
Anti-statist.
Anti-statist.
Yeah. So all the things that you hear teenagers in punk bands yelling, like they actually have the political theories.
These are the punk band kids grown up, became Cernovich. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Cernovich is cool. He's definitely emerged as one of the new voices for new media, whatever you want to call it, alternate media. He does a lot of periscoping on Twitter. Direct to his fans and audiences. He's got a new documentary called Hoaxed coming out, talking about the bad state of mainstream media. So he's definitely a big player in terms of new voices, and was interviewed by 60 Minutes as well in a big interview way back about a year ago or so. Cool. Next up, we have Tucker Carlson. Tucker is a little mainstream for this video. Yeah. The perfect face for Tucker. Never gets old. Whenever someone's trying to explain something to him in an argument, he always stares at them with Tommy's face that Tommy has right now. So Tucker is included on this list because back in 2016 election cycle and all this stuff, lots of people, Tucker's been around for forever. He was always in broadcast journalism. But he had a lot of videos that got edited of him just whipping people's butts in debates leading up to the election and after. There's this one with Zach Patenkis. He's this, I think that's his name. He's this bald guy, and they're discussing gender fluidity and the implications of Title IX and like giving girls money for sports, and if you can just say your gender at any point. To watch Tucker interview that guy is hilarious. To debate him. And Tucker's actually one of the guys who Christopher Hitchens, who's a person we will soon talk about, said to look out for. So Christopher and this was on the left and this other guy's on the right, and they wrote a book about which people on each side of the spectrum that they respected. And Christopher respected Tucker and told him to keep writing. And he has his own publication called The Daily Caller, but right now he's on Fox News, has his own time slot and show there.
Next up, we have Lauren Southern. Lauren Southern is a Canadian-born libertarian. She was on Rebel Media, which is like the same as Gavin McInnes and others. She was. That's right. Yeah. She left, I think, last year.
Tommy, I think you're using the wrong pronoun for her. For him.
I'm not even going to try. We already did Jordan Peterson, right? We can.
Yeah.
No, she ran for Canadian federal election, finished dead last. Recently in the news, March of 2018, she was barred from entering the UK because she did a social experiment. She's kind of famous for those social experiments, but she did one where she was passing out posters saying Allah is gay, Allah is trans, Allah is a lesbian, Allah is all of us.
In response to an article she saw where she said, is God gay? Talking about Christianity.
That's right. So if you want to learn more about her, she has her own independent YouTube channel now.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, and I'd say the pronoun thing because she technically, to prove a point, got her gender switched to a man in Canada. So she's a man in Canada.
Yeah, not actual transgender, just...
Right.
In case you're confused.
Yeah. Next up, we have OG Thomas Sowell.
Thomas Sowell.
Again, one of these OG academics. Thomas Sowell has written numerous books. When it comes down to it, a lot of this political argument is just disagreements on economics and how the market should function. And Thomas Sowell is definitely a pro-free market guy. He's been studied in many places. Right now, he's at the Hoover Institute in Stanford, and he started his career always studying economics. I think he was at Harvard for a little while. But tons of people have been influenced by his books and his works. His book Basic Economics is really interesting. He writes books about economics, about politics, about race, and really it puts it in layman's terms and makes it easy to understand, and is really accessible in that way.
Yeah, OG identity politics guy. I mean, Thomas Sowell is 87 years old. You guys,
yeah,
right? He's 87 years old, and when I first saw a video of him, I thought, oh, who's this young guy? No, he was like 50 at that time. So we're talking like 37 years ago. He was making a stance. He's an African American, born in Harlem, I believe, right, or grew up in that inner city type place, and he's very like the minimum wage gap, for example, when that was popular, saying like the minimum wage, making a minimum wage is going to oppress the black community even more, right? And so I think that he's one great to listen to if you want to see the original libertarian, like the OG.
Yeah. If you think of something that you didn't even know you already had an opinion on, just because it's the mainstream thought, he'll give you the counter argument for why you shouldn't think that. Yeah. Cool.
Next up, I have Charles Murray. Charles Murray is a political scientist for the Libertarian Party. He, and Michael referenced this earlier, he's used the phrase, the bell curve, right? And he wrote a pretty controversial book called The Bell Curve, which basically stated that it was intelligence that is going to determine your future, not any like parental socioeconomic status or your educational level or anything like that. It's kind of intelligent trumps all. And then there's some racial connections there, which it's uncomfortable, but he was just simply pointing out the facts, and now he's called a Nazi.
Yeah, he's another one of these guys who gets shouted down at universities and things like that. And the acceptance, or at least the ability to look at the bell curve in a scientific way and in an objective way scares a lot of powers that be, including teachers unions, including universities, where there's a lot of evidence that shows it's mostly IQ that determines people's success in life. So of course he's going to get shouted down by tons of people who have a lot to lose if that's the truth. So next up we have Steven Crowder. Steven, another Canadian here. A lot of Canadians on this list. What I think you and I have talked about before is that it seems that Canada's a little bit farther down shit creek in terms of the free speech battle. So I think that's probably being reflected with the Lauren Southerns, the Stephen Crowders, the Molyneux, the Jordan Petersons. I mean, we can go on. There's so many Canadians on this list. So Crowder was a contributor for Fox News for a while. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. That's why I like him. He is a Christian. He has his own show on YouTube where he does kind of a mix of his own, kind of like a talk show, conservative talk show. He also does man on the street interviews and this series where he says, I believe this, disprove me, and it's usually something, a conservative viewpoint. Kind of a fearless guy. He dressed up as Bob Ross and painted Muhammad on his video. Again, one of these guys who's being demonetized and has really resorted to a lot of crowdfunding for his show.
Next up, we have Bret Weinstein. Bret Weinstein is a professor at Evergreen State College. Background on him is in Evergreen, there's a very long tradition of all of the people of minority, mostly the black community, faculty and students would have a day of absence where they would leave the campus, not come to school at all, to kind of show the significance of their importance in society. Great, proud tradition they had. Except for last year, 2017, they decided that they wanted all the white people not to come, including faculty, not to come to school, which Bret Weinstein said, well, wait a second, that's way different. Saying we're not going to come versus you can't come, that's racist. And he was just eaten alive for his essay on that, and him saying that he wasn't going to leave. I mean, he decided he was going to not do that, and the students demanded his resignation. Bret Weinstein is probably the most progressive person we have on this list. He's probably the most to the left, but it's just kind of the perfect divide of like what the left was and what it's become now. He's been on pretty much mostly all of these guys' podcasts talking about this since.
Yeah. Cool. Next up, we have Sargon of Akkad. So his real name is Owen Benjamin. He is a YouTuber who took the pen name Sargon of Akkad, where it's an old Akkadian emperor. So he did a lot of political commentary up to the 2016 election and beyond. A lot of people know him for his defense of Gamergate and feminists always trying to attack him and saying that he hates women, but he always, of course, rebuts that with his logic and reason. He's an important guy. He's been, again, shouted down at universities, had his talks tried to mess up. And one of the things that I really respect about Sargon and that really stuck home with me is back when the Pizzagate thing happened, where they were talking about how there was some pizza store in the Washington, D.C. that was being run by elites to run a pedophile ring. When that turned out not to be true, a lot of mainstream media discredited people who were running the story, like InfoWars, like Cernovich, and other people. And his point was that using this Pizzagate thing, the mainstream media is the tone they were taking is like something like that this was fake and it's something that could never happen. And so his point was, he made this very long story about how children all over the world are exploited, how this actually does happen. There's been multiple reports. He linked to articles of Interpol in Europe arresting like 90 people at once for, there's been tons of busts of these rings all over the world. And that really changed my perspective and made me kind of wake up to that problem a little more too. And I just, it's something people don't like to talk about, which is, I don't really understand, but
I completely agree. Mine as well. I mean, it's still happening. I mean, there are actual truth pedophile rings happening in America that we're breaking up, and they're not all conspiracies. So it's good to
right. Yeah, and I think a little tangent here. Like when we say the word conspiracy theorist, like a lot of times mainstream media tries to use that word as like to discredit someone, when in actuality, the conspiracy theory, like we rely on the press to be conspiracy theorists. Like Woodward and Bernstein, when all the president's men, they were trying to find out they broke Watergate. Like technically they were conspiracy theorists. They had a theory about a conspiracy that actually did happen. So I wanted to throw that out there because I think it's important to know when we talk about Alex Jones, when we talk about Cernovich, when we talk about other people who that word is thrown around a lot. Like that's what the press is in my point of view. I mean, of course, there's stories that don't have a lot of weight, but there's I think that's an important part of the free press in the United States. You need to listen to conspiracy theorists.
Okay, so next we have we're going to go into an even faster round. We have a group of people that are even less well known. So we're gonna fire through those. Starting off with Miss Blaire White. Now she officially is a woman. Blaire White was a born biological male, and while still a male, identified as a woman and started pretty much a conservative YouTube channel, which got her just a ton of hate, but also perpetuated her and got her a ton of followers. I first learned about her because Joe Rogan said that she's the hottest transgender. It's like, I have to look up who this person is. Recently, she's went through the surgery, so she now anatomically a woman?
Just transgender woman. Yeah.
Now she has a vagina.
yeah, there you go.
So she's got a following and she's up and coming. It's a smaller following, but it's getting bigger. So
yeah, it's just another version of Milo, like someone that the left usually takes as one of their own and is conservative. They don't like that very much. All right, next up we got Eric Weinstein. So brother of Bret Weinstein, like we talked about earlier. Eric has been an important intellectual. He's been on Sam Harris's show, on Dave Rubin. Talks a lot about the politics in the United States, and I think from my experience, he especially focuses on issues with class. Talks about the different quadrants of strata of people in the United States and like what their economic goals are. Talks a lot about rent-seeking elites, which is people that try to use the power of the state to hold on to their business and profits and use law and lawyers to muscle smaller business and stuff like that. Had his own hedge fund. Just an overall really smart guy. Is a mathematician and is just your brain grows whenever you listen to him. So.
Next up, Matt Christiansen. He hosts his own YouTube channel where he comments on political contemporary issues. I think that what he does really well and where he got famous was analyzing debates. And he always brings a very fair, well-balanced perspective to either side. Even if it's someone that he agrees with, he's going to keep them in check. So that's probably the thing I like most about.
Yeah, he's kind of like an everyman. He also does a live show on YouTube with a YouTuber named Blonde in the Belly of the Beast called The Beauty and the Beta, I believe it is. It's pretty good, and they have a lot of fun. Next up, we got Owen Benjamin, stand-up comedian. Owen is one of these guys who refuses to be politically correct, even living in Hollywood, living in LA. I think he lives in LA now still. But a fantastic piano player, isn't afraid to talk about Islam, isn't afraid to talk about transgenderism, basically anything that is mainstream accepted on the left, he likes to bash, and that's lost him agents, it's lost him managers. I don't know about agents. Definitely his manager went another way, I think, with him. But he's a funny guy and important voice. He has his own podcast, too.
Next up, we have Mark Dice. Mark Dice is a YouTube personality. I like him most, and I think where he became famous was his conspiracy theories. I know we talked about that term, conspiracy theories, but I'm talking like Bohemian Grove, satanic worshiping, Illuminati controls everything. He's really fun to listen to if you're into that sort of thing.
Yeah, and most recently has made a killing on YouTube. I think he's got over 1 million subscribers of basically bashing and critiquing mainstream media where he just laughs at them all day. It's pretty funny. Next up, we got Tim Pool. Tim Pool is one of these guys, go to ground. He is like, soldier on the street, always covering protests, really honest guy. Just, in terms of the people that I really look to that I just know is going to give a true, honest take on their experience. Tim is one of those guys. I think he used to report for Vice and a few other outlets, but now he's independent. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's got his own Patreon. So interesting guy. Definitely, if you want to be in the thick of the protests that are going on, he'll be there with the camera.
Next up, Paul Joseph Watson, classical liberal, publishes content on YouTube, heavily criticizes Islam, feminism, pop culture.
Yeah, editor at InfoWars. He's a funny dude. He's got again over 700K subscribers on YouTube, a big cult following, and has had multiple death threats in his critiques of religion and culture. So check him out. Next up, we got Steve Pinker. Steve Pinker, another OG academic. Spent a lot of his time at Harvard, I think. But Steve has been recently actually kind of back in the eye of this new media where he's been going on a lot of these shows. Dave Rubin. I think he spoke to Sam Harris as well. He's famous for his books. He's an author. He wrote The Blank Slate back in the 90s, which was a rebuttal to the idea that humans are born and can just be molded solely by environment. It gives a strong argument for hereditary genes and traits and how they express themselves even without culture or environment. So for many reasons, a lot to do with people in education. They don't like him very much for those extremist views that they call him.
Next up, we have Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She is an American activist, a very, very passionate American activist, a real feminist, I like to call her, not what the left would label a feminist.
Real femme.
A real femme. She strongly opposes Sharia law, genitalia mutilation, forced marriage, Islam, because she was a victim of all those things. So if for our women listening who are looking for that type of feminism, she get behind her, not a Linda Sarsour.
Yeah. Yeah, and she escaped to East Africa and went to the Netherlands and was working on a documentary there. And her partner was actually murdered in the street by a jihadist. So I think she lives full time in the United States now, which is good. She's at she's at the Hoover.
And she's on like a ton of wanted, like top kill list for Al Qaeda.
Yeah, people don't like her very much. Yeah, but actually she's at the Hoover Institute with Thomas Sowell actually now. So she's I'm almost 100% sure on that. So great person to look for, and written a few books as well. Another not ex-Muslim. Next up, we have Majid Nawaz. So Majid is a reformist Muslim. He has his own show in the UK called Quilliam, I believe. No, Quillette. No, which one? I'm confusing. There's one in Australia. I think it's Quilliam. Anyways, he has his radio show. Former jihadist. If not jihadist, former Islamist. He was arrested in Egypt and spent a lot of time in jail, where he reflected and found out that the path he was going down was not the right path. So now he wants to be a strong voice to reform Islam and to get rid of a lot of the extremist problems that they're having. And wrote a book with Sam Harris actually called Islam and the Future of Tolerance. So and he's, I believe, suing SPLC, which is the Southern Poverty Law Center, which back in the day was fighting against white supremacy during the 60s and the civil rights era, but now, in my opinion, has gone way astray in their original mission, and put him on a list of people to watch out. Sort of like what we're doing, except we're being positive about these people. They put him on like a hate watch group or something like that. So he believes he's suing them now. All right, next up, 15 seconds. Fire round.
Fire round.
Lightning round. Lightning, then fire.
Lightning, then fire probably makes more sense.
Okay. Fire from the sky. Hellfire from the sky. Got it. All right, so 15 seconds on each person. I'm going to go fast. Here we go. Ready? Can you start the timer? All right, we got Tommy Robinson. Tommy was just permanently deleted from Twitter. Go ahead and ask Milo Yiannopoulos how that worked out for him. It really increased his following. So Tommy Robinson is a leader of the EDL, which is the English Defense League, which calls out a lot of problems that they're having with mass immigration over there, and is getting a lot of flack from mainstream media and in the fight for free speech over there. Next up, we got Matt Drudge. Drudge runs the Drudge Report. He's been independent journalist for the past 15 or 20 years. Really jumped onto the internet train back in the day and has been pretty independent since then. Then we got James O'Keefe. So that's Project Veritas. What they do, they go into whether it's government programs or whether it's corporations or whether it's liberal think tanks with hidden cameras and hidden voice recorders, and they always try to find out what's really going on when people are face to face with them. Then we got Roaming Millennial. She is a political commentator. She's on CRTV right now. She's got a show on there. Started with the YouTube channels. Just one of these clear voices where you just you can't help but listen to her and agree with her because she's so rational, logical, and just a kind person, you can tell. After Roaming Millennial, we got Sarah Haider. She is leader of the Ex-Muslims of North America. Grew up in a conservative Muslim family and is now an atheist and wants to make the process of leaving Islam easier for people because here and in other places in the world, Islam, leaving the faith is considered to be a capital punishment where you're at risk of death or ostracization. So it's happened in the West. It's a little bit rarer than it is in the Middle East, but she wants to create a community for that. Next up, we got Jocko Willing. Jocko is an ex-Navy SEAL, has his own podcast called the Jocko Podcast. He first got famous from being on Tim Ferriss' podcast, from being on Sam Harris's podcast. A really interesting guy, really talks about the realities of war, and is another one of these guys that a lot of young men look up to in terms of organizing your life and being a better person. So done with Jocko, we got Ethan and Hila Klein. This is H3H3. These guys have a hilarious YouTube channel. They got a podcast now, which is really successful. They're married and they're both just kind of really down to earth people. And what I think is most attractive about them is that they're really trustworthy, and you can just tell they're being real. I can't say much more than that, but check them out. They've got funny videos where they critique modern art, where they critique crazy feminism, and they're pretty good. Then we got Christina Hoff Sommers, the based mom. She was known for defending people during Gamergate, which Gamergate was, which we mentioned a little earlier, was when a lot of people were blaming the violence and misogyny of culture on video game players. And she came to their defense and is kind of a voice of reason for original feminism, like first wave feminism. For that, I got a text. Yeah, so she's great to listen to. Another OG feminist, another OG academic is Camille Paglia. So she's one of these people that, same like Christina Hoff Sommers, is there's more about the facts when it comes to this gender debate that we have going on, where she critiques this third or fourth wave feminism that we're seeing in the beginning of the 21st century, where the goals have strayed way far from the original ideas of being treated fairly in the workplace and all these things. She's a firecracker, Camille Paglia. She's hilarious. She's, yeah, real femme. Yeah, real femme. Then we got Jonathan Pye. He's a YouTuber. He's on Twitter. His shtick is to pretend to be like a field reporter who just finished his report, and then when he finishes, he goes on these loud, crazy rants. He's a big defender of free speech and of a more libertarian guy. Hilarious to listen to. One of the guys he's in the UK, so he's an Englishman. A few more here. We got Fleeces Talks, another guy sort of like Tim Pool, where he goes out in the street and interviews people, man on the street interviews, he likes to he's a conservative and likes to show the flaws in liberal logic for a lot of people that go out on the streets and protest. Freedom Toons. This guy is really funny. He has these. He makes cartoons animated that kind of include a lot of the people that we're talking about here, I won't say much more than that. Just go check them out, and you'll see some of the people that are on this list here too. There. A couple more. We got 1791L. That's a YouTube channel. This guy started really coming to prominence before, during, and after the election in 2016. He has his own Patreon account where he talks about his desire to bring like a cool design medium to conservative and not as much conservative, but more libertarian and anti-authoritarian culture battle. Like he wants to be the Vox of the libertarians, is what I get from them. Then we got Claire Lehmann. She started. Okay, so I'm pretty sure it's Quillette. Now I'm confusing myself, but she started a really science-based publication in Australia, which is also being kind of swarmed up by this culture war, by the left-leaning logic and Marxist ideologies. So she's kind of a voice down there against that stuff. Then we got Gad Saad, who has his own show called The Sad Truth. He's a behavioral psychologist who focused on marketing and how some of those ideas can be brought to marketing. Another one of these guys, he's like just a nice old kind of dad of the internet who you can trust, and is very smart and has a lot of good interviews. Finally, to end the fire lightning round, we have Khait, who, where can people find a good interview with her?
Duh, that's from our show, our last episode, where we interview her and you can learn everything about her.
Yeah, so she was formerly on the show Survivor on CBS. She was a professional poker player. Now she's a Christian, not really born again Christian. I don't know if you'd call it that.
Just go to our show and you can learn everything about her.
Yeah. You'll find out about her. Her YouTube channel was permanently canceled and banned. So she's another canary in the coal mine for this culture war stuff. Boom. I don't think I've said that many words in 5 minutes in a long time.
You were 5 seconds over. We got to do it again.
Oh, okay. All right, here we go. So, Tommy Robinson.
All right, last round. The final sad round? Sad lightning?
Sad round. Yeah. It's like the lightning. It's like choo.
Like if I was struck by lightning and died, that kind of lightning round.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Right. Because
we're bonus round.
Bonus round.
Dead or
ding,
in
ding,
jail.
Ding, dead or in jail.
All these people are either dead or in jail or going to jail. All right, who we got first?
We have Christopher Hitchens, of course. If you don't know who Christopher Hitchens is, shame on you. Just stop what you're doing and just I'm jealous that you get to learn about him for the first time. I mean, read anything that he's ever written, watch anything that he's ever, any of his talks. He's been around for he used to be around for a very long time. He was a famous atheist and famous for criticizing almost everybody and everything. Known, probably the first of like the contrarian, public contrarian. I love him mostly for his just absolutely beautiful writing. I mean, the way he speaks is with so much elegance and so much magic. Even if you disagree with him, you have to stop and just be like, "Oh my God, this is poetic."
Yeah. Just just a genius with the English language. I would just call him. He's just like a relentless, vicious debater. Like, there's no other way to put it. He was so good.
He'll make you hate Mother Teresa.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a book about why Mother Teresa is evil, called The Missionary Position. Anyways, he passed away a couple of years ago from throat cancer, ironically, but has some great stuff that you should check out. Next up, we got Andrew Breitbart, another one who R.I.P. passed away at the age of 43 a few years ago from a heart attack. A lot of people don't know this about Breitbart, but he started Huffington Post with Arianna Huffington, who was back in the day a little more conservative than she is now, obviously. Now the Huffington Post is sort of a left-leaning publication. But he was one of these guys. He came to prominence when he uncovered the Anthony Weiner sexting scandal. He was on a mission to uncover the Democrat media complex, is what he called it, which is just all these powers that be that work together in effort to prop up the Democratic Party and leftist ideology. Of course, started Breitbart.com, which was going after big Hollywood and big government, and which has since changed since then. But he's another one of these guys who's full of life, and watch him take down people in debates, watch him in arguments, read his books. He definitely knew what was going on with this culture war.
Next up, we have Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli. He was famous for, so anybody who doesn't know Pharma Bro, I mean, he's hilarious. A lot of people would call him evil because he raised a very important drug that people needed to stay alive. It was like a heart disease drug or
I think it was HIV or AIDS or something like that.
Yeah, it was like an HIV drug where people needed it. Was like normally a $56 a pill, and he raised the price to $750. So people went kind of insane over him, and then he began to debate everybody and would have people and just had this smirk little look on his face like.
Yeah, he's a troll.
Yeah,
he grew up really poor, and now is like started his own pharmaceutical company, made millions. But the whole point was that he said that his company had this program where no one who needed the drug didn't get the drug. So the raise in price was being covered by a lot of these insurance companies, and then they had a program with if someone needed it, they could get it for free. And a lot of people in mainstream media especially ignored that, and they just wanted to bash him for a drug that he bought the rights to as an older drug and a patent because of the realities. He just wanted to show people the realities of the pharmaceutical industry. The rarer the disease, the more expensive it's going to be to fund and look for a cure in that.
So this is not why he's going to jail, though.
No, yeah. The details of why he's going to jail is I don't really understand. I think it's along the lines of defrauding investors. That's what he was convicted for. I would love to know the actual details of it, but nevertheless, is just somebody who a lot of people love to hate, and he has a lot of rebuttals as to why they shouldn't. Okay, then we got Count Dankula. So this guy is, I think, the most important person to talk about in the past month. Count Dankula is a YouTuber who trained his girlfriend's pug to do a Nazi salute when he's told the dog "gas the Jews." So it was obviously a joke. It was obviously funny in context, but he was arrested in Scotland, taken to a Scottish court, and was just convicted of a hate crime for this, and is, unless something changes with his verdict, is going to jail. So we have a lot of people coming out to support him. Ricky Gervais, Jonathan Pye, who we talked about earlier, but also a lot of silence around his case too. So it's kind of a canary in the coal mine in the UK of where these hate speech laws are going.
One more. Take that last one.
We got Dosmas. We got Julian Assange. So Julian Assange, I'm sure everyone has heard of WikiLeaks. He was back in the day when he released a lot of government documents exposing problems with the way governments were running these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's now, I believe, in the UK in some consulate. I don't know what country is housing him, but he's in danger of being extradited for WikiLeaks. But yeah, I think he's an important person to look into in terms of what the debate is between national security and transparency with people in their governments, and I think he started that debate with WikiLeaks. Last guy, we got Milton Friedman. Again, anybody who's libertarian, anyone who's free market and looks into this stuff and really wants to learn more about why it's a bad idea for governments to run central banks and to try to control economics. Milton Friedman is one of these original gangster, what do you call it? Economist? Economist, yeah. He's written tons of books, been on tons of talk shows, and is just famous for having super well thought arguments and really good rebuttals to a lot of people's questions about what we would do in absence of government assistance, and kind of like a Thomas Sowell, just really influential in that field. By the way, Count Dankula jail, Julian Assange jail, Martin Shkreli jail, Milton Friedman dead. Just in case we almost gave someone a heart attack out there who thought one of these people was dead.
You originally had Thomas Sowell on this list, and I had to remind you he wasn't dead. He's just
I did. That was oops. He's old as hell.
Well, it's like if Larry, people thought keep thinking Larry King's dead. Yeah. Still not yet. No, so that's it. I mean, I hope this served as a useful as you're introing into the culture warriors. Yeah. And if you want us to do a deeper analysis on any of these people, because we want to have time to go through everybody, please let us know. We'd be happy to. And if there's anybody that we forgot, well, it's because they're not important enough.
Yeah, and we don't like them.
We disagree with them, so we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah, call it what you want, whether it's new media, whether it's alternative media, the intellectual dark web. These names keep popping up every time I look into this stuff, and I'm obsessed with it. And I think a lot of these people, like we said in the beginning, they're not afraid to ask questions, not afraid to keep living life and changing their viewpoints and not settling on something. So a lot of integrity in this group, and I think it's a good place to start if you're maybe you're a college kid disagreeing with what's going on in your classes. Maybe you're working a job where your HR department is driving you insane. It's a good place where a lot of these people are free thinkers and are not afraid of ideas and not afraid of critiquing others' ideas and having their own ideas critiqued.
Absolutely. So, and if at any point here we were human, so we give our own opinions and biases on these people. So we don't want you to be swayed at all by any of them. The point is for you to go learn for yourself and see if what these people have to say.
Yeah.
So
yeah, don't listen to us. We're stupid.
And if you loved us and you don't care about any of these people, then go subscribe at Duh.
Duh podcast, which ideally would, if you're watching on YouTube, is right underneath. Everyone knows
I've always
this.
wanted to do that. I've always wanted to
Should we be like one of these YouTube bros yo dudes, subscribe right here.
And then
yeah.
Can you put an image here?
I can do something there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't make it like a dick though. That'd be okay.
Can't make any promises. When are we selling merch, by the way? We need to get some merch.
Yeah, when you get some mugs.
Like a keychain or something.
Keychain or mugs or stickers or...
Faux show.
All right, we're rambling.
Yeah.
All right, signing off. I think that's what they say.
Yeah, they say that.
Signing off. Duh.
Duh. Peace in the Middle East.